Welcome back to the Starved Rock Murders. I'm here with my amazing trusty co-host, Whitney Brown. Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
You know, Whitney, we're recording this Tuesday, September 3rd. A week from tomorrow is our big court hearing.
Yeah.
There should be a court ruling on the state's motion to dismiss our post-conviction petition. And one of two things is going to happen. If the judge grants the state's motion to dismiss, the case is over. And we would have to then appeal it, which we would. If the case denies the state's motion, the case moves forward to the third and final stage, which is an evidentiary hearing, basically a trial that I would hope would take place by the end of the year. So I just wanted to get on here with you. You know, this has been a long journey. We started this longer ago than we realized.
Do you want to know exactly how long it is?
Yeah, tell me.
I was thinking about it over the weekend. So you and I first started talking about this case in the summer of 2018.
Oh my God.
So yeah, so we've been talking about it since the summer of 2018. We started the prep on this podcast when I found out I was pregnant. So we have been doing this podcast for 2 years and 9 months because my son just turned 2.
That blows my mind, really.
Right.
And then now picture this, you know, in your son's world, it's 2 years of his life. Picture these years in Chester Weaker's life when he's now 85 years old, you know?
Well, I had this like weird feeling this morning, Andy, and I was like, you know, one of the analyses that you've used in the past is, you know, imagine telling Chester back in 1961, you know, you got to wait. There's a baby that's going to be born in the future.
Yeah.
And then that baby's going to grow up and go to law school and then practice for decades and then take on your case. And I had this like sickening feeling. I was like, God Almighty, please tell me you don't then like this doesn't extend and we have to tell like basically now JJ has to like become a pre-law student to get on board on this team.
No, it's amazing. I just wanted to get on here with you and kind of, you know, talk a little bit about where we're at. It's been such a long road. It's been exhausting because of all the obstacles we faced. You know, people have heard me, you know my feeling about the Will County State's Attorney's Office. I think they should have vacated this conviction long ago. I want to talk just briefly here about, you know, something we talked about in our last podcast episode. And I was thinking about it, this Randy Reynolds interview, okay?
Yeah.
So the standard here for this court hearing is whether our new evidence, when collectively looked at with the old evidence, is such a conclusive nature that it would probably change the result on retrial. And then other cases talk about it undermining the integrity, you know, of the conviction. Let's just focus, and we've got so many pieces of evidence, and you got to look at it collectively. You know, the state wants to do it one by one. Let's just talk about Randy Reynolds. I think the thing that you'll hear, you know, thrown up from the people that think Chester's guilty, and I don't think there's many of them, frankly, is, the confession says there was this red airplane going overhead at the time he was killing these 3 ladies. And, you know, that was true. They checked it out and that was true. Okay. The confession was taken by Deputy William Dummett, who I'll remind everybody, Louis Getch, the Justice of the Peace, who's in his 90s now, when I met him a few months ago, called him Bad Billy Dummett. That's how he was known. Bad Billy Dummett. This guy had a reputation that was incredible. Everybody knew it. Tony Raculia, the prosecutor, knew it, okay? So Dummett takes the confession, and for him to be at his retirement party, okay, and Randy Reynolds, who has no dog in this fight, to say, I heard Dummett say, I thought Chester was innocent, but I got him to confess. That just right there proves the confession's bogus, it's coerced. The Red Plains story is nonsense. He fed all that to Chester. I don't see how, and if you listen to the full Randy Reynolds interview that Will County conducted, about a half hour long, that's on the Andy Hill podcast website, you can listen to it. He's so credible. Yeah. There's no explanation for Dummett to say that at that party, which he said.
Right.
Randy heard it. There's no explanation for that other than, you know, he thought Chester was innocent, which means, if the plane was flying overhead and all the confession was legit, he would never say that. He would
Right.
never say that. How does that not just say the confession, throw it out the window?
I mean, okay, here my cynical answer, I mean, at this point is that logic is just not applying here, right? Logic is not applying. This is just simply the state's attorney's office saying, we don't want this overturned. To me, that is the only explanation. We don't want this overturned. And so you can give us all your facts and we're just going to keep saying, it doesn't matter to us.
This. So, let's look at it this way. And in a lot of the cases that I cited in my brief, the cases where people were getting their convictions vacated based on new evidence were cases that were weak at the time of trial, and there was no forensic evidence linking the person to the crime, which is what we have here. There was no forensic evidence linking Chester, no witnesses linking Chester, nothing. He got arrested before he had even confessed,
Right.
And so picture that trial, all the same evidence is presented, but then picture John McNamara, Chester's attorney, calls Randy Reynolds. And Randy Reynolds tells the story about Dummett saying, yeah, I thought he was innocent. And then picture the McNamara calling a lab to say, oh, we did DNA testing on a hair found on Frances Murphy. The same finger, by the way, that her fingertip was missing. It came back to a male profile, not Chester Weger. Oh, it came back to one of these Bray brothers who were local to the neighborhood, putting on an evidence from a false confessions expert. Nobody knew in 1960 the concept of false confessions. Somebody saying now it's a scientific thing we know is true. It happens. Here are the factors. All the factors are present here. And putting on Roy Tyson and Mrs. Smith talking about her grandfather and all these things. Put all that evidence on. You don't think that would probably change the trial result? Hell yes, it would probably change the trial result.
So let me ask you this, Andy. If this were not if this case had not taken place in the early 1960s, if you were just called in today to defend this case just on what you knew on paper, would you think this would even go to trial?
No.
Based on the evidence that you have?
No, I mean, Chester wouldn't even have been charged. I mean,
right, okay.
It's so outrageous. I think what gets looked over is the constitutional claims, which, by the way, that's pending as well. We're going to get a ruling on that next week as well, whether our constitutional violations can go forward, which is the big one is Chester got arrested without probable cause. So what that means is probable cause, you have to have like a reasonable basis in fact to think the person may have committed the crime. It might be a witness saying something. It might be, some other evidence, circumstantial evidence. They had nothing. All they had at best, was that he allegedly failed a polygraph. Okay. That's not probable cause. And by the way, he passed the first 6 polygraphs. So I don't know how persuasive to say he failed the final one. There was no probable cause to arrest him. And then he gets arrested and he's now facing a triple murder case, being threatened with death. It's not a huge surprise that he confessed to save his life. So no, the case wouldn't even have been charged today. And I just think it's incredible that we're still fighting this. I mean, that's the part that makes me want to pull all my hair out, that Will County just doesn't have the courage to do the right thing,
Yeah, I think one other thing to just point out, if we've used this sort of metaphor before, but like if we were writing a screenplay and you were trying to stack up a bunch of plot points to kind of make someone look innocent and look like somebody was railroaded, I think if we took this, if we wrote all this out and we took this screenplay in, somebody would go, hey, Whitney and Andy, cool it. You're putting too many plot points in. Yeah. Because like another little element that, as you just mentioned, the hair found on the severed fingertip matched to one of 3 brothers. And one of those 3 brothers was found mysteriously dead, slumped over his snowplow at the ammunitions yard the same morning the women's bodies were found. And I feel like, right, then just add that plot point. And if you add all this up, woman whose body is the most battered, husband is the CEO of a huge Detroit motor company, right? He then has a child, we think, right? We were pretty confident with his secretary. Right, just keep adding all these plot points in. And the Lensic, I could call it the Lensic memo, right? The telegraph, the telephone operator. Would you not say back to me, Whitney, too much?
Yeah, yeah,
Too
yeah. Over the
much.
top.
It's over
Over
the
the
top.
top. Yeah,
We
yeah,
can't have this many points. Like if we actually, you and I just do this all digitally at this point and handwrite things, but like, could you imagine if we actually made a board with little push pins like they do in the movies and tied
yeah,
string?
yeah, yeah.
Like, what a
You
bizarre nest that
should
would
make
look
one.
like. Right? We should, just
You
for the
know,
absurdity of it.
you brought up the Zelensky memo, so I wanted to tell everybody. Uh, I have a YouTube page now. The podcast has a YouTube page, so this episode you can listen to it. You can also watch it on YouTube. And I recorded today also a YouTube video, just a YouTube video. Gosh, it's probably about a half hour long, just talking about the telephone operator part of the case, the Lois Zelensky part. And in doing that, I was blown away again by how outrageous that part of the case is. People don't know about it. The person that was entitled to the reward money was not Harlan Warren or Bill Dummett or polygraph examiner Stephen Kindig, who received the reward money. It was telephone operator Lois Zelensky. She cracked the case. This is the part that makes me crazy. First of all, if you look back at her memo, it's very, very detailed. And the Illinois State Troopers conclude, in fact, I've got it here right in front of me. They conclude and they say, after taking this statement, we agree with the lieutenant's opinion that this subject is most sincere and quite relieved to finally tell her story and get it off her mind. This is what gets forgotten. They traced the call to William Palmateer's house. Glenn Palmateer might not have made that phone call. We talked about this. I actually think it was probably Lupe Cardenas, okay?
Mm-hmm.
But the call goes to William Palmateer's house, okay? So he's the guy who says, tell them to get rid of them, burn them, in terms of the bloody clothes, all right?
Yeah.
This is the thing that gets lost in the shuffle. Stephen Kindig, the polygraph examiner, wants to claim that she failed her polygraph and was fabricating and making things up. This is the part, let me just read this paragraph from the memo. In further conversation, which I didn't listen very closely to, I gathered the impression that the LaSalle party was an auto dealer. They were talking about a business deal pertaining to cars, and the LaSalle party said he had the money to go ahead with the deal. It gave me the impression that it was a bigger deal than just the purchase of one car, more like the purchase of a business or business location pertaining to cars. Now, LaSalle party, we know, after they traced the call, it turned out to be Peru. Peru's the town right next to LaSalle. They always call it LaSalle. Okay. And guess what? Traced to the house of William Palmateer. And what was his profession?
He was a car dealer.
Oh, she was spot on. Spot on. So you mean to tell me she got that part right, but the first paragraph, let's just read this again. Somewhere between 6 and 8 p.m. on March 21st, 1960, when I opened my monitor key to notify the parties that their time was up, I heard the Aurora party say that there was a big write-up on the murder case in tonight's paper. Pause. They're clearly talking about the Starved Rock murders. No doubt they're talking about the Starved Rock.
Yeah, I mean, what else is it going to be?
You know, the kid has blood-stained overalls in the trunk of the car, and he's getting a little anxious to know what he's going to do with them. He's afraid he'll get caught. LaSalle party says, well, tell him to get rid of them, burn them. End of conversation relating to the murder. How can you possibly clear these brothers, especially William Palmateer, based on a polygraph? He passed he allegedly, you got a polygraph examiner who, by the way, Stephen Kindig is friends with Robert Murphy, Francis Murphy's husband.
Right.
He allegedly passed a polygraph exam, and you're going to believe his denial that he said those things? I mean, that is just a lie. That is just a bald-faced lie that he did not say these things that the telephone operator overheard. And then Stephen Kindig is going to claim that she failed the polygraph exam. This just makes me, want to pull all my hair out. I mean, we kind of gloss over this, not gloss over it, but like it is the guts and heart of the case. She cracked the case within days. Within days. Oh my God.
Well, so if I, my day job is I'm an ethics professor, and I'm just thinking about if I were teaching like a first grader or somebody who knew nothing about what a conflict of interest was, I would use like the most elementary example of if you're the polygraph examiner, but you're friends with the murder victim's husband and you're taking a reward for just doing your regular job, conflict of interest. Like
No doubt.
it's such a comedic, and not that there's anything funny about it, but yet it is such a comedically absurd conflict of interest that should be so self-evident to anyone that they should recuse themselves, or anyone else observing this dynamic should just go get another polygraph examiner.
Yeah. I started going through this just kind of preparing for the hearing next week, even though I think it's just going to be a ruling. I think the court will just issue a ruling. I want to be prepared to answer questions and argue things if I
Yeah.
have to, even though we already argued this motion, previously. And that's when I was going back through the Lois Zelensky telephone operator aspect of the case, Randy Reynolds, the Dummett aspect of the case. And it just reminded me how strong this new evidence is. And I just can't get over the fact that if you presented this all in 1960, um, it would have been so powerful and overwhelming. And I want to say one more thing about Dummett and the confession. I thought that Chester's lawyer, John McNamara, gave like a Clarence Darrow-esque closing argument. This is what I'm reading this from the transcript. This is what he said
Mm-hmm.
in the closing argument. He said, "This confession is the most fantastic, improbable thing that I have ever heard of, and is capable of being thought up only by a man of Bill Dummett's caliber. This is utterly impossible and unbelievable. Ladies and gentlemen, this confession is the record of a deputy sheriff with political aspirations who took this young American citizen, outraged his liberty, violated the laws of the land, trampled on the Constitution, and then committed the darkest and deepest perjury in this court of justice to cover up his deed." I have goosebumps right now
Yeah.
reading that. That is like a scripted TV show line that was written by who's the famous screenwriter that wrote like West Wing and
Oh, Aaron Sorkin.
it's like an Aaron Sorkin line. What
Yeah.
I just
Yeah.
read is like a line that you thought about, like an Aaron Sorkin line.
Right.
I mean, for McNamara to say that in 1960, it was powerful, so powerful. And I just can't stress enough. I mean, like the Dummett part, what a bad guy this was. And what Randy Reynolds has said blows this out of the water. And so I'm just, I'm hopeful for next week. I'm optimistic. I think
Yeah.
we have proven our case. You know, we deserve to win. We
Yeah.
should win. I hope we come back and record an episode talking about we have won and where we go from here.
It's interesting you say we. Uh, when I say we, I hope everyone who listens to this podcast interprets what you're saying when you say we is not just the legal team and Chester. I think we the people,
Yeah.
right? I mean, well, it's like to borrow from Martin Luther King, a threat to justice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And when something like this is allowed to stand, and it has been going on for 60 plus years and is continuing to just be this
Continuing.
egregious miscarriage of justice,
Continuing.
everyone should be afraid. Everyone should be freaked out. Anyone who has a son, right, or a daughter that might be placed before the criminal justice system should be freaked out about this and should care about the outcome of this trial. Even if you have no interest in the specifics of the case, you should care about the principles at stake here.
The stakes are huge. We've come a long way, Whitney. We have come a long way. This court hearing is huge because we got to get to that third and final stage. I really want to get the opportunity to have our hearing, put on all our evidence. We forget about so many little pieces of evidence. I got a little list here from the brief I filed. There's so many pieces that you forget about. Let me just give you an example that this is literally the last one mentioned in our brief that we filed in response to the state's motion to dismiss. Wayne Hess's admission. Remember that guy, James Woods, who said, I heard my dad was buddies with Wayne Hess, Deputy Wayne Hess, and he heard,
Yeah.
heard Wayne Hess say something like, "What we did to that kid, Jimmy, was wrong. You know how we
Yeah.
treated that kid was wrong." Um, we forget about Harlan Warren's notes, commence psychological warfare,
Warfare.
man
Yeah.
to confess. We forget about the other pattern and practice of Dummett, Robert Harris, who Dummett tried to
Right.
1970 for that huge robbery. We forget about the mafia links. How about this one? I mean, this is the one that kind of I forget about. So when you read that memo, the Zelensek memo, what we know is there's somebody with bloody overalls in the trunk of a car. All right.
Hmm. Yeah.
She's hearing this on March 21st. Okay. So that is 5 days after the bodies were discovered. It's a week
Yeah.
after the murders. All right. And then the William Palmetier, it's definitely William Palmetier,
Hmm.
says, tell them to get rid of them, burn them. Okay.
Yeah.
I did not know of that memo at the time I talked to Roy Tyson.
I
Okay.
was just gonna say
And
that.
what did Roy Tyson tell me when he reached out to me out of the blue? I didn't even know about this memo. These are such obscure details that you would never make up. So what he says is Smokey Rona told him that he had bloody clothes in his car, right? And he didn't know
Yeah.
what to do. He didn't know what to do with them. Let's pause there. That's a weird thing to make up. Why would you, if you're playing devil's advocate, like Roy Tyson just making this up? Why would you say like, oh yeah, he had the clothes in his car. He wasn't sure what to do with them. Why would you throw that in there? It's so
Yeah.
it's
It's such a piece of minutia
yes,
that it just it yeah you would
yeah.
go on.
Yeah.
We were saying the same
And
thing.
then what does Roy Tyson say? Smokey Rona says he wasn't sure what to do with them. So what that means is he did not get rid of the bloody clothes right away. He wasn't sure
Yeah.
what to do with them. They were in his car. And then he ultimately, what does he do? He burns them. He goes to the Bureau County burn pit. It was like,
Hmm.
I think the way Roy described it was there was like, hey, bring out all your garbage and junk and
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
throw it in the burn pit if you want. It is absolutely precisely consistent with what the telephone operator overheard. It is stunningly
Right.
consistent. I mean, incredible. And so again, you've got that. I mean, it's just when you add it all up, it's indefensible. It's just indefensible in my mind.
Right. I mean, again, I can't reiterate this point enough. If you just well, this is what we've done, right? We have taken all these facts, and if you put them in a timeline, right, on a spreadsheet, and you just go day by day by day by day, even sometimes down to the hour, you can see the pattern absolutely emerging of all of the pieces fitting together and basically Chester getting railroaded, right? The timing, the pieces of evidence of other people who are talking. It's just it's so obvious to anyone who has a rationally functioning mind. And so, back to my point from earlier, the fact that the state's attorney's office is still fighting this to me just feels so sinister.
Yeah, and what they said in the last court hearing was, uh, we believe the confession. We believe the confession. Now that was before the Randy Reynolds evidence, but I've been notified that they've changed their mind. I guarantee you, Will County is going to show up next week insisting that the confession is legitimate. Um, and so that is their position. They believe the confession. Okay. So, win or lose, we're going to be back next week recording another episode. I am
Yeah.
hoping we're going to be recording a happy episode, talking about where we go from here. No matter what, we will be back next week as soon as we can, giving you an update about exactly what happened in court. I expect there to be a written ruling that I can post on the podcast website that everybody can read. That's kind of the way the judge has done it before. So, Whitney, to be continued. I can't wait to talk about this more with you next week.
I
Until
know.
then, positive vibes, positive thoughts.
Positive.
Yeah. Any parting thoughts before we wrap?
I think my parting thought is going to just reiterate what I said before. Please, anyone who is listening to this podcast, tell anyone else you know about this case. I feel like not enough people know about this injustice. We have our base of people that listen to this podcast, but more people need to know. And please share this, because I just can't stress enough what a miscarriage of justice this has been for over 6 decades. Tell someone you know, get them interested, get them passionate about this. That's all I can ask of people.
Amen. And that's why, we started the podcast. That's why I started a YouTube page. That's why I even started a TikTok page,
Right.
TikTok channel. I want to get the story out there to as many people as we can. And one last call for help. Anybody that knows anything about the case, especially the older generation that's in the Starved Rock area, and especially about some of these people, Glenn and William Palmatier, Lupe Cardenas, the Bray brothers, William Dummett. I still believe in, especially the Bray brothers. I mean, I have gotten radio silence. There's like, there hasn't been really any discussion about these brothers at all. And I am convinced there's somebody out there who knows something I feel like we have the whole jigsaw puzzle out on the table. It's all done. We got one piece that we don't have yet that fell on the floor. We can't find it. And that last piece, even though we don't necessarily need it, is linking one of the Bray brothers to somebody involved in this crime, into some activity, or friends or connections with somebody involved in crime. Because that person who was there, that hair, we know they were there. We don't know what they did, but it could just been there as a helper. Maybe it was the other guys that did the dirty work, but this person was there to assist. But that person was there. We know that for sure. All right, Whitney, to be continued.
To be continued.
Great talking. Everybody stay tuned. We will be back soon. Bye.